Breaking, EA-18G Growlers disrupt Venezuelan radars offshore, forcing shutdown at dawn.
At 4:26 a.m. local time, alarms quietly lit up across Venezuelan radar stations. Two unidentified aircraft appeared suddenly over the Caribbean, moving fast, flying low-risk but high-pressure routes just off the northern coast. Over 600 miles per hour. Altitude, 30,000 feet. Distance, less than 50 miles from shore. They were not entering Venezuelan airspace. They were doing something far more dangerous. Instead of turning away, the aircraft held their line, sliding along the edge of radar coverage with perfect timing. No radio calls, no warnings, just steady movement, like they already knew where every sensor was pointed. Inside command rooms, tracking screens began to act strange. Signals didn't disappear. They bent, they wavered, they came back wrong. Operators checked settings, then checked them again. This was not a glitch. This was pressure. Every second those aircraft stayed on course forced a decision. React too fast, and you reveal your defenses. React too slow, and you lose control of the sky. Venezuela believed it was ready for a confrontation. What they didn't understand yet was this: one of those aircraft was not there to attack. It was there to collect everything. And once that happens, the real danger is no longer what's in the air. It's what comes next. What happened offshore wasn't random, and it wasn't about showing off. The stretch of airspace north of Venezuela, near Aruba and Curacao, is one of the most sensitive zones in the Caribbean. It protects oil routes, ports, and coastal cities. Every radar there stays on high alert, day and night. That's exactly why this location matters. For Venezuela, losing control here means losing early warning. It means not knowing what's coming until it's already close. And for us forces, this corridor offers something else entirely: answers. These flights weren't about crossing borders. They were about watching reactions, how fast systems turn on, which radars talk to each other, which ones hesitate. That's where the danger really starts. Because when defenses react under pressure, they reveal habits, and habits can be predicted. For the crews involved, this wasn't just another mission logged and forgotten. These are pilots and operators who know that today's data decides tomorrow's survival. They fly knowing that one mistake, one wrong call from the ground, can turn tension into tragedy. On the political side, this moment lands right in the middle of rising pressure between Washington and Caracas. Warnings have been issued, lines have been drawn. Neither side wants to look weak. And that's the risk. When both sides believe they're defending their position, even small moves can spiral fast. One radar lock, one misread signal, one order given too late. So here's the question this moment raises. If Venezuela believes it must stand firm, press 1. If you think us forces are sending the smarter message, press 9. Because what happened in the sky today wasn't the end of the story. It was the reason the story now matters. The first real reaction didn't come from missiles or radio calls. It came from the screens. Inside a Venezuelan radar control room, a tracking symbol shifted color. Not gone, not locked, just unstable. The operator leaned forward, adjusting settings by instinct. The signal sharpened, then bent again. That's when everyone understood this wasn't normal air traffic. At the same time, out over the Caribbean, the aircraft kept moving. Same speed, same altitude, no sudden turns, no aggressive dive, just controlled pressure. One of those aircraft was an EA-18G Growler. From inside the cockpit, systems were already wide open. Receivers scanned the air silently, collecting every radar pulse that reached out to touch them. Each signal told a story: how strong it was, how often it refreshed, how quickly it reacted. Back on the carrier, Super Hornet crews watched the same data stream. They didn't need to launch. Not yet. Their job was to stay ready while the picture formed. On the ground, Venezuelan operators faced a choice they trained for but never want to make: turn systems off and lose visibility, or keep them on and risk exposure. Some radars adjusted frequency. Others paused briefly, then came back online. Each move was logged. Time stretched. Seconds felt longer than they should. No one wanted to be the first to escalate, but no one wanted to back down either. This is how confrontations start now. Quietly. Technically. With human hands hovering over switches, knowing one wrong decision can pull everyone past the point of return. So ask yourself this. If Venezuela should have powered down and avoided the risk, press 1. If you think US forces were right to keep pushing the line, press 9. Because once the first response happens, there is no such thing as going back to normal. As the minutes dragged on, the tension didn't fade, it sharpened. In situations like this, distance becomes a weapon. Closing just a few miles can force radar operators to make decisions faster than they want to. Holding position does something else. It applies pressure without warning. The aircraft offshore didn't change direction. They adjusted spacing instead. That small shift told a clear story. This wasn't confusion. This was control. On the Venezuelan side, short-range systems slowly rotated, searching for stability. Operators tried to smooth out tracking lines that refused to settle. Data updated, then lagged, then updated again. Nothing stayed clean for long. Inside the EA-18G Growler, settings changed subtly. Not full power, not an all-out push, just enough to keep every radar uncomfortable, just enough to force constant correction. And constant correction wears people down. After long minutes staring at unstable screens, fatigue begins to matter. Reaction times stretch, judgment slips. A half-second delay doesn't sound serious, but in air defense, that half-second can decide whether a system locks or misses. Out over the water, the scene was eerily calm. No sudden maneuvers, no radio chatter, just engines cutting through the night air. On the carrier, Super Hornet crews tracked the same picture. Fuel levels, timing windows, weapon readiness. They knew exactly how long they could remain on station. They also knew that if a radar locked fully, the response would be immediate. Anti-radar missiles were ready, programmed, waiting. This is how escalation happens now. Quietly, technically, through stress rather than noise, through pressure rather than fire. Each side watched the other, waiting for a mistake. And that's what makes moments like this dangerous. Because once someone believes control is slipping, even a defensive move can look like the start of an attack. So ask yourself this. If Venezuela was right to keep its systems active and stand firm, press 1. If you think US forces managed this escalation more carefully, press 9. Because at this point, nothing had exploded, but everything was already on the edge. What Venezuelan crews didn't realize at first was that something in the picture wasn't real. As operators focused on stabilizing their main tracks, additional signals began to appear on the edges of the screen. Not strong, not weak, just convincing enough to demand attention. The kind of signal that forces a second look. Some radars shifted toward them. Those signals were decoys. The Growler wasn't just listening anymore. It was shaping what the other side thought it was seeing. Fake returns pulled radar focus away from the real flight path, stretching attention thin across multiple directions at once. Inside command rooms, confusion set in quietly. Operators exchanged quick glances. One track appeared closer, another seemed to slow. A third briefly vanished, then came back. Which one was real? This is where mistakes are born, not from panic, but from overload. When crews are forced to split attention, even disciplined teams can miss what matters most. Out over the water, the real aircraft stayed steady. Same altitude, same speed, no sudden moves. While attention drifted, the Growler continued collecting clean data from systems that believed they were tracking something else. For the US side, this moment confirmed something critical. Some defenses chased noise, others stayed locked. That difference decides how fast control can collapse later. Venezuela still believed it was holding control. They didn't know yet that the picture they trusted was already bent just enough to work against them. So here's the question. If Venezuela should have ignored the extra signals and stayed focused, press 1. If you think US forces played this twist the right way, press 9. Because from this point on, the situation wasn't just tense. It was unbalanced. The most dangerous moment came quietly. On one coastal radar site, a change appeared that no one wanted to see. Not a full weapons lock, not yet, but close enough to trigger warning indicators. Inside the Growler cockpit, alerts flickered across the display for a brief second, then stabilized. Every crew member noticed. This was the edge, the point where control can slip without warning. One wrong assumption, one rushed order, and the situation would turn violent fast. A short radio call cut through the silence. Maintain course. The aircraft did not turn away. They did not speed up. They stayed exactly where they were, holding position just long enough to force the next decision onto the ground. On the carrier, Super Hornet crews were fully alert. Hands hovered near switches they had trained for years not to touch unless absolutely ordered. Anti-radar missiles were powered, programmed, ready to launch the moment a hostile lock became clear. No one wanted that moment, but everyone was prepared for it. Inside Venezuelan command rooms, pressure peaked. Operators stared at screens that refused to settle. Tracking lines almost locked, then slipped away. Data refreshed a fraction of a second late. Voices stayed low. Breathing slowed. Powering up risked exposure. Powering down meant losing sight of the sky. Seconds dragged on. 3 of them felt endless. Then, without warning, the radar went dark. Not destroyed, not hit, simply shut down by choice. The tracking line vanished. The lock dissolved before it could cross the final threshold. For a brief moment, there was nothing but silence. No cheers, no relief, just the weight of what almost happened. The Growler eased its output. Systems returned to passive collection. The aircraft began a slow, controlled turn north, still calm, still measured. The pressure lifted, but the message remained. Sometimes the climax of a confrontation isn't an explosion, it's restraint. It's the moment someone decides not to press the button. So ask yourself this. If Venezuela made the right call by backing off at the last second, press 1. If you think US forces won this moment without firing a single shot, press 9. Because when a radar goes dark by choice, it means everyone understood just how close they were to losing control. By sunrise, the Caribbean looked calm again, almost untouched. No smoke in the sky, no wreckage in the water, no emergency statements from either government. To the outside world, it appeared like just another quiet morning. But for the people who were actually there, nothing felt normal anymore. Venezuela's air defense systems were still intact, still standing, still armed, but they had just been tested under real pressure. Reaction times were measured, stress points were exposed, command decisions were forced earlier than planned. Which systems stayed active? Which ones hesitated? Which ones shut down when the risk became too close? That kind of information does not fade once the aircraft leave the area. For US forces, the mission ended exactly as designed. No shots fired, no borders crossed, no public escalation. Yet a detailed picture was drawn of how Venezuela responds when its defenses are challenged without warning. This is how modern confrontations work now. They are not decided by explosions. They are decided by preparation, by understanding how the other side thinks when seconds matter and pressure builds. Politically, the message was just as clear. Washington showed it could apply force without using force. Caracas showed restraint without admitting weakness. Both sides stepped back, but neither side reset to where it was before. That's the part many people miss. Once reactions are studied, the next encounter doesn't begin at 0. It begins with knowledge. And knowledge shortens response time. It narrows options. It removes uncertainty. The crews involved know that. The planners know it too. This was not a mistake. It was not an accident. And it was not the end. It was a test run. So now the question isn't what happened offshore. It's what happens next. When the same radar screens light up again and the pressure returns even faster. If you believe this standoff helped prevent a bigger conflict, press 1. If you think it only pushed both sides closer to the edge, press 9. What makes moments like this truly dangerous is not what people see, but what they don't. No press conference can undo the data collected. No calm morning can erase how close control came to slipping. Every future decision will now be shaped by this encounter, whether leaders admit it or not. And that means the next move, whenever it comes, will happen faster, with less warning, with fewer second chances. Because once both sides have tested the edge never feels far away again.